What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. In today's episode, I'm going to be previewing the Week 5 action. We have one of, if not the biggest game of the year going on in the SEC this week, and a couple other games I want to highlight. But before I get into it, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But without further ado, let's dive into this Week 5 slate. Going over a couple of Friday night games, just quickly running through these ones. Virginia Tech, 2-2, is on the road at number 7, Miami, 4-0. The Hurricanes are number 2 in yards per game of total offense with 605, and then they're also first in the country with 16 sacks. So the Hurricanes have been really efficient on both sides of the ball. This is kind of a test for them against the Hokies. I think they're able to win. They're able to win comfortably, but they're favored by a lot in this one. So I'm going with Virginia Tech getting the cover, but Miami by around like 17 points in this one. Another quick rundown, kind of an interesting Big Ten game here. Washington 3-1 at 3-0 Rutgers. Will Rogers, the Huskies quarterback, has 8 touchdowns and no interceptions. There's another guy I'm going to talk about later in this video that has a similar efficiency rate. And he's also thrown for over 1,000 yards. Kyle Mananjai, the Rutgers running back, has rushed for 457 yards and 5 touchdowns. And the Scarlet Knights have a top 20 passing defense, so they might be able to give Rogers some issues in this one. I'm going to go with Rutgers by 3 for a cover in this one. Then moving into Saturday, another game going over quickly, a couple of games quickly. Number 6, Ole Miss, has what I think is really their first test of the year. It's not much of one. It's against Kentucky, but the Wildcats did give Georgia quite the test a couple of weeks ago, so I don't think this is a game that the Rebels can overlook. I do think they win comfortably. Another similar game, number 12, Michigan against Minnesota. Minnesota is tied 4th nationally in interceptions. Now, if the Wolverines go more with their ground game like they did this last weekend with Alex Orji at quarterback, I don't think that's as big of an issue. But if they try to pass the ball again, this Golden Gophers defense could give them a little bit of issues, but I think Michigan gets the win to hold on to the little brown jug. The main game in this noon window, number 20 Oklahoma State at number 23 Kansas State. Both teams are 3-1, 0-1 in the conference after both lost last week. They're both looking for a bounce back. K-State got drilled by BYU on the road in Provo, and then Oklahoma State was kind of held in check by the Utah defense. I think this is a case where Oklahoma State gets their offense going a little bit better this week. I think Kansas State keeps this one close, but they do lose a home game to the Cowboys. I think Oklahoma State has just looked a little bit better. Through the first 3 weeks, I would have said it was Kansas State, but Kansas State had some issues pop up last week, and I'm going to go with a road upset in this one. I think Oklahoma State pulls the road win. Another quick couple games to go over. BYU into the top 25 for the first time in a while. I'll pop up here when the last time they was. They're 4-0. They're going on the road to Waco to face Baylor's 2-2. After their big win, I think they're able to start picking up some genuine hype with a win here. I think BYU by 10. One other game here in the noon window, Maryland 3-1, 0-1 in conference against Indiana, who's 4-0, 1-0 in the Big Ten. I think the Hoosiers offense continues to roll and picks up a good win over the Terrapins here at home and improves to 5-0. A good start so far already for Curt Cignetti. I think that continues. Moving into 3:30, Wisconsin, they're 2-1, going on the road to number 13 USC, who's 2-1 and 0-1. Both of these teams are off of a tough loss. Wisconsin had a bye week after they got drilled by Alabama at home, and then obviously USC lost that game to Michigan last week. USC was a little bit leaky against the run at Michigan, but this Badgers team is not the Badgers teams of Monte Ball or Melvin Gordon, those running backs that they've had over the years. I think USC is able to control the game in this one, and I think they pick up a good home win, their first win as a Big Ten member in Big Ten play, 35-20. Big game going down in South Bend. Number 15, Louisville, who is 3-0, at number 16, Notre Dame, 3-1. The winner of this game kind of grabs an early hold on a CFP bid. With a win here, Louisville would pick up, obviously, a big win over the Fighting Irish that would be lessened a little bit because of the Notre Dame loss to NIU earlier this season, but would still be an impressive win and a big win on the road for the Cardinals. That would boost their resume. For Notre Dame, it keeps them in the conversation. This is probably, outside of their game against USC, they're probably their only real tough remaining test, unless Florida State is able to figure things out when those teams meet later this season. But this is a big game for both teams. The Cardinals have a really good offense so far this season. They're number 14 in yards per game with 502.3 and 12 in points per game with 47.3. Both of those numbers dipped down a little bit in the game, the win over Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's defense was able to limit that a little bit. So I think another thing here, too, Notre Dame is so hard to read. They had issues last week as well against Miami, Ohio, but they looked really good against Purdue the previous week, and they looked good at Texas A&M in week 1, and then obviously the loss to NIU. So each of the 4 weeks, you're getting a different Fighting Irish team, so which one's going to show up this week? They have shown, however, that they do kind of rise up to the bigger games while maybe they play down to their opponents. I think that continues. Louisville's offense, I think, is going to be tough to stop, but I think the Irish have a defense that's good enough to do that. I'm going Notre Dame 24, Louisville 17, but this is not the end of the road for the Cardinals because obviously this is not an ACC game, so they still have everything in front of them in the conference going forward. Couple other quick hitters. Oklahoma at Auburn. This is a chance for both teams to bounce back after pretty bad losses last week. Auburn at home to Arkansas. Oklahoma at home to a really good Tennessee team, but still didn't look great in that one. I think this is a chance. I think they do bounce back. And then mentioned Arkansas already. They're coming in off that big road win at Auburn. They're going to face Texas A&M. I believe this one is at AT&T Stadium in Dallas. I'm going to go with Texas A&M in this one, but I think Arkansas is able to hang around and make things interesting. Colorado 3-1 at UCF 3-0. I think this is a game that's going to be really fun to watch. Colorado, I just actually, perfect timing, got done watching Joel Klatt on the Herd with Colin Cowherd talking about the Buffaloes, how matchups, this one might not be great because they often play man defense to heighten the strengths of Travis Hunter, and a run game like what the Knights have with KJ Jefferson at quarterback and RJ Harvey at running back will be tough for that to stop. However, another thing too, Colorado has been very hit or miss, and something that Klatt, who is obviously a Colorado alum, talked about is that they have very high highs because they're an emotional team, and then they have very low lows, and it's hard for them to string wins together. I think they do here. I think this game could be high scoring, and that plays, I think, like it did last week against Baylor, to the Buffalo's advantage. I think Coach Prime gets I would say, marquee road win and starts to maybe build a little bit more hype around this program again for Colorado after that tough road loss at Nebraska a couple weeks ago. A game that's lessened in importance, I think, a little bit. 4-0 Liberty goes on the road at 2-2 App State. The Mountaineers haven't looked as good as maybe some people expected them to be this year. I think Liberty gets a comfortable win and picks up what is still a solid Group of 5 win, but maybe not as important as before. I think Liberty's going to find it hard at the end of the season stacking up their resume against the likes of Boise State, especially. I think that's their biggest competition, and unless Boise State drops one somewhere, it's going to be tough to keep them behind the Broncos, who have already gotten into the top 25. Then at 4 p.m., UNC, off of really kind of, I would say, a disappointing, not quite embarrassing, although defensively it certainly was, loss to James Madison. I think they lose against the Blue Devils, who are 4-0. They're tied for second nationally with 15 sacks. I think they create issues in this one for North Carolina at quarterback, and so I have the Blue Devils getting a win over the Tar Heels, and obviously that rivalry game. Another interesting one to watch as we move into the evening window here. Ohio State, they're 3-0. They have not had a test yet. I think Michigan State will be a little bit of a test. The Spartans actually are level with Duke with 15 sacks through the first 4 weeks. The Buckeyes, I think, are going to be pushed in this game. I think Will Howard's going to have to do some things with his legs. I think they do pull away late, though, and the Buckeyes get a win here. Then moving into the night game, one game quickly going over before the big one that I teased earlier in the video. Illinois, number 19 in the country, 4-0, 1-0 in the conference at number 9 Penn State, who is 3-0. This is their first conference game. The Fighting Illini already have 2 ranked wins. That was at home against Kansas and then at Nebraska last week. Luke Altmaier, mentioned earlier, Will Rogers from Washington, who had 8 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Luke Altmaier has done him 2 better with 10 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. So he's been really clean, but he goes up against a top 10 Nittany Lions defense. They're not ranking up there in terms of takeaways, at least not interceptions, but they do have one of the most ferocious and hard-nosed defenses in college football. And the Nittany Lions also have a top 10 offense. If this game is in Champaign, I think Illinois hangs around. Either way, I think Penn State wins. I believe they'd be covering. I'm going to go Penn State 34, Illinois 14. Now, finally, the big game of the week. This is, I would say, the best game of the year, probably until Georgia against Texas in a few weeks. Number 2, Georgia, 3-0, 1-0 in conference, and number 4, Alabama, also 3-0. In obviously what is an SEC championship game rematch from last year, which Alabama won in the last SEC game, coached by Nick Saban. Georgia defense, as they have been for the last several years under Kirby Smart, ranked 3rd in points per game allowed with just 6 per game, and 4th in yards per game with just 202 yards per game allowed. They shut down a Clemson team that really has taken massive strides forward and showed that they are a high-powered offense, scoring 66 and 59 points the last 2 weeks. Alabama, though, is 6th in scoring at quarterback. They've obviously got Jalen Milroe. Jam Miller is their leading running back, and 17-year-old freshman Ryan Williams has stepped up as their wide receiver 1, I think with 250 receiving yards through their 3 games. Obviously, on Georgia's offense, they're led by Carson Beck, but he's struggled some against Kentucky. However, he has been able to be efficient, throwing no interceptions, same as what Milroe's been able to do. But again, both teams kind of had issues. Against Kentucky for Georgia, it was penalties. They had 9 for, I think, 85 yards in that game. They also faced a lot of pressure from the Wildcats. They actually were never sacked in the game, but especially early on, Carson Beck was kind of put off balance and was either forced to throw the ball away or try to pick up a few yards on the ground. I think if Alabama can kind of bring that pressure again, that could be huge in this game. Another thing to note, though, I think a lot of people are, maybe thinking that Alabama doesn't have Nick Saban anymore, so will they be able to win these big games? And while I will say Kalen DeBoer has not coached in an SEC game of this caliber, he's coached in a game that has higher stakes already, the national championship, obviously losing that, but I think Michigan was kind of just a freight train last year, and they were going to win that game regardless. Kalen DeBoer, I want to talk about him here for a second because he maybe doesn't get as much credit as he's due. He has proven at every level that he knows how to coach a team to a win. And I think he showed that even at Sioux Falls, where I'm not trying to take away from the talent level they have there, but it's not to the talent level of what he is able to use now. Even at Washington is a step down from what Alabama has. He has proven at every level he knows how to win football games. And I think he does it again here. I'm going to go with Alabama 27, Georgia 24. Georgia did not impress me in that game against Kentucky. Their defense did against Clemson. That is still something that I'm hanging on to a little bit here for this Georgia team, but I'm not sure if they're the best team in the SEC, and I don't think Alabama, even with this win, is either. I think it is Texas. I think, debatedly, I think these teams could be on an even footing with Tennessee. We'll find out in a few weeks when, obviously, Alabama plays against Tennessee the 3rd Saturday in October. Ole Miss is still up there. They've kind of quietly gone under the radar because they haven't played anybody yet. Like I mentioned, they'll play Kentucky, so that'll be a little bit of a measuring stick. However, that one is in Oxford, so a little different than the Bulldogs going to Lexington. But that's kind of my thoughts on where the SEC stands at this point. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to take a deeper dive at kind of the hierarchy of the SEC right now. I might maybe do that after this game anyways to kind of be able to get like a bigger picture. Like now we've seen 2 games in the SEC, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Georgia, Alabama, that we can kind of see where teams are at. But one final game to keep an eye on. This one has, I would say, lessened a little bit because of how Arizona has kind of looked a little iffy at times, but that's the late game, I think 10:15 Eastern, Arizona 2-1 at number 10 Utah. The Utes, they got a big win at Oklahoma State. They didn't look great, but obviously they're still without Cam Rising at quarterback. Not sure of his status for this one. I think they do get another win at home over these Wildcats. And I'm going to go with Utah 30, Arizona 23. I think Noah Fifita at quarterback has thrown 3 interceptions this year, so I think that's something the Utes defense, which is one of the best in the Big 12, can exploit. So those are my predictions, my preview of the Week 5 action. Let me know in the comments below what your predictions are for these games and what you think of the analysis provided. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burtnett, signing out. Peace.